All right, moving on. So the first book that I brought, and for those who had not watched my lectures yet, I like to leave the source of the slide on the top right corner. So this first one is psychographed by Chico Xavier, and it's called by André Luiz, and it's called Between Heaven and Earth. So it's gonna talk about speech, because a lot of the times, and I think we can all relate to the fact that sometimes it's very hard to stay silent, and sometimes and oftentimes it's very hard to know when to speak up and what to speak up about, what to say, and how much weight do our words actually carry. So in terms of speech, so speaking and talking about the words themselves, Clarencio took André Luiz to this woman's house. She was named Clara, and she was basically giving a lecture and like teaching some of other women, like this is in the spiritual plane. And when they were there, Clara was talking about speech and what does speech entail? What do our words, how can they transform or destroy and all those things? And she invited Clarencio and André Luiz to sit down and just talk a little bit about, okay, this is what we're catching up on. So she said, speech, whatever it may be, invariably entails specific electrical energies, liberating rays of a dynamic nature. So she's talking about when we speak, this is energy being transferred. And she says the mind is the incessant generator of power through the positive and negative wires of the sentiment and the thought, thereby producing speech, which is an electromagnetic discharge regulated by the voice. So she's talking about the sentiment, she's talking about thought, and how speech has this electromagnetic characteristic to it, feature to it, that we oftentimes do not even think about, that when we're speaking words, just like when I'm speaking right now, they carry this electromagnetic force with them, and this is orchestrated through the mind, through our thoughts. She goes on to say, that is why, in all areas of activity, the voice modulates speech. This requires the purification of inner life, because speech, after the mental impulse, so after we have that mental impulse that will produce the speech, the words that are coming out of our mouths, lies at the base of creation. Thanks to speech, people approach and adjust themselves to the work they're responsible for, and by means of the voice, such work may be aided or retarded in space and time. It's very hard to hold our tongue, more often than not, because our thoughts come very quick, and we're still very much driven by impulses. So speaking and then wishing we could take that back is, one, impossible, and two, it's very hard to do, because when sometimes we say things we regret, is because our thoughts are very quick and we don't have that filter, that maturity yet to modulate our speech, to exactly think about things before we say them. And she's also talking here, this is interesting, she says that by means of the voice, such work may be aided or retarded in space and time. So like the work we're trying to create, the things we're trying to achieve may be aided or retarded, meaning like we can progress or we can digress in our progress, in our advance, depending on the words that are coming through our mouth, which are electromagnetic creations. This book, unfortunately, we don't have that in English, but it's a book by Emmanuel from the Living Spring collection, psychographed by Chico Xavier. And in this message number 97 says the verb is a creator. So it talks about what comes out of the heart and mind through the mouth is a living, throbbing force involving the creature for good or evil, depending on the nature of the emission. Look at the responsibility of that. Involving the creature, but it depends on the nature of our speech, of our words, of our creation. We're gonna involve the creature in good or evil. The psychic elements that we externalize through our mouths are powers acting on our behalf, active factors that act under our responsibility. So we are, yes, responsible for what we think, we are responsible for what we create, and the act of speaking, this creation that comes through the mouth as an impulse from the mind, is indeed our responsibility. So we have to really, really be careful of what comes through our mouth. Leon Denis, in this book called The Problem of Life and Destiny, he talks about how feeble our language actually is, the current state of our evolution, and how our language is very feeble. So he says, the soul, in its deep intuitions, may have the sensation of the infinite things in which it participates and to which it aspires, but it would seek in vain to express them with the rudiments of our feeble human language. In vain would it strive to translate eternal things into the poor language of the earth. So he's basically talking about here that language as we have it right now in this state of our evolution in this planet that we are in, it's still very feeble, it's very weak, it's very incomplete to translate exactly what it means about eternal things, or what eternal things actually mean, and to translate that. So we feel a lot of that, but to translate that into language, it's very complicated, much like a 4-year-old cannot explain quantum physics because its language, its brain is not equipped for that yet. Same way we are not equipped, our language is very limited to translate these eternal concepts. The word would be impotent, yet our evolved consciousness is capable of perceiving the subtle radiations of higher life. So Denis here is talking about how our conscience can capture, can get in tune with that, even if we cannot translate that into words. And how often have we felt things or even experienced things that are very hard to translate into words? Try to translate into words the love you feel for a son, for a mother, for a father, for a partner. It's very, very hard. We feel it. We feel the love, and if we try to put into words, it always feels like it's short. It's not enough. So that's exactly what he's talking about. Like these higher things about the higher, the higher life, these radiations, we capture them, we feel them, but it's very hard to translate that into human language. And that's okay, because we will get there one day. In this book by Chico as well, unfortunately we don't have this one in English, in the message number 24, it says, words are agents in the construction of all the buildings of life. The verb is the light of life, which Jesus himself used to bequeath to us the renewing gospel. So to bequeath is to give or to leave by or to hand down. So that Jesus gave us. And these are some very good examples. He goes on to say, Emmanuel goes on to say, in everyday work, be it as natural as the simple bread on the table. So he's talking about the utilization of words. In everyday work, be as simple and natural as the bread on the table. In effective exchanges, let us use it as pure water, which is very, very hard. In serious moments, let us do it like the surgeon's scalpel, which prudently limits itself to the incision in the diseased area without unnecessary blows. So he's talking about in serious moments, so in moments where we're more agitated or we're more aggravated, to use it as the surgeon uses the scalpel, to just for that specific incision. So we can use our verb only to address those things that need to be addressed and not necessarily exploded out of proportion, which we very often do. On sad days, let us consider it, so the word itself, an efficient remedy without deviating from the dosage. Also, again, he's talking about prudence, he's talking about the right quantity, the right type, the right amount of words that we use on sad days as well, so we don't deviate from the dosage. And we always got to think too that if we're creating something, if we're acting and our words are expressing our actions, or we're expressing our actions through words, we got to think of what goes around comes around. So our actions, they have consequences, and we indeed are responsible for those consequences. So we are responsible for those things we create. We are responsible for those things that we say, because those, as we learn, are electromagnetic creations that can shape a lot. The law of action and reaction is immutable. We cannot avoid it. It doesn't change. It is what it is. If we create, our creation is going to have a reaction. It's going to have a response to that. And we cannot avoid that. So it's a matter of what are we creating necessarily, not whether what we do is going to be, oh, I just said this and I just offended that person. Nothing's going to come out of it. Things will come out of that. So we have to be careful with that. And I even put it there. Those around us are attracted to us based on how we behave. And by behavior, meaning behavior could be covert, meaning like even our thoughts, or could be overt. So like more expressive, like our words, for instance. And those around us, they're attracted to us based on how we behave, based on what we're doing, based on what we're saying. And this goes to the discarnate spirits as well. So when we're thinking about arguments, about these like slanders, when we're thinking about gossip, when we're thinking about all those things, what sort of spirits, what sort of discarnate spirits are we attracting with that? And this is something for us to think about. Again, bringing to the light the idea of the responsibility of our creations, of our speech. And even if we think about the discarnate spirits, like question 459 of the Spirits book, what is the influence that the discarnate spirits have on us? And they say the influence upon our actions from the discarnate spirits, they say is greater than you suppose. So we're more influenced than we actually realize. And what we're doing, when we're creating, we're being influenced as well. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, we're going to see a little bit about the overuse of speech. And this is what it says. If we did not exceed the limit of what is necessary for the satisfaction of our needs, we would not have the sicknesses which are provoked as a consequence of these excesses, nor would we experience the vicissitudes which derive from them, from the excesses. If we put a limit on our ambitions, we would not have to fear ruin. If we did not desire to raise ourselves higher than we are able, we would not have to be afraid of falling. If we are humble, we would not suffer the deception of hurt, pride. And then here, this is interesting. It says, if we practice the law of charity, we would not be slanderers, jealous, or envious, and so would avoid arguments and fights. So again, it's the overuse, it's exceeding these limits that are in place. And then when we do that, we have, remember the law of action and reaction? We have reactions from that. We have results from those consequences. There are consequences to our actions. And in the Umberto de Campos, he brings a moment in which Jesus is talking to his disciples. I mean, he's there with his disciples, the apostles, and they're all arguing amongst themselves, and some are criticizing the others behind their backs, and they're doing this and they're doing that. And Jesus comes to them, and he talks about this parable of a nation who wanted to grow their harvest and everything, and they needed like a bigger sense of community and society. And he says the good spirit came and it like inspired them to speak good things, to speak more, constructive things. And then the whole community started to work better and work and like to help each other, and their harvest blossom. They saw a lot of good things come from just speaking, in better terms and trying to have more peace amongst themselves. But then, as they became very powerful, they went and they decided to mock their neighbors who were still in that stage where they were arguing amongst themselves, fighting amongst themselves, and not being successful and productive. And what happened was, he says, the bad spirit came and influenced those, and the words then became so important that they started a war against the neighboring village. So everything that they constructed was destroyed. And so he's talking about, in truth, the action comes from the arms, but the direction always comes from the thought through the tongue. So he's talking about the importance and how even some words can cause so much destruction if not used properly, or depending on what time. Just because those that were more successful, they mocked the others. The others then came and retaliated. So this was something that he was trying to teach the apostles, the disciples, to be more mindful of what they were talking about themselves and among themselves as well. He says, a phrase of encouragement and kindness is a ray of light this is what Jesus said, capable of lifting an entire nation, but a disturbing sentence can lead people to ruin. So disturbing sentence can lead people to ruin. One sentence. And in the book, again, this book, unfortunately, don't have that in English yet, but this message 73 from this book by Emmanuel, it's called Chatter, or Yapping, or Jabbering. It says, "Let us not forget, however, the evil chatter that always forms around us, an immense family of sick or degrading elements, like lethal worms that proliferate in silence and operate in the shadows. Rare people meditate on this. Isn't the unruly verb the father of slander, gossip, frivolity, and disturbance? God created the word, in the world, but in this case it says the word. Man created the talk." So he's talking about the unruly verb. So those words that are not necessarily slander, but they are the base. They're the little seed that will then turn into slander, gossip, frivolity, lower level conversations. This unruly verb. And then Emmanuel says, if alcohol intoxicates the vicious, destroying their energy, what about the misguided tongue of good that destroys vigorous sowings of happiness and wisdom and love and peace? The misguided tongue. And that is interesting for us to think about, the misguided tongue. So this misuse, or oftentimes, as we saw in the gospel according to Spiritism, the overuse of the verb, of our words. Destroying and all of that. If we go to the Bible even, there's plenty of mentions about slander, about the verb, about misuse of speech and everything. And I brought a few here. About slander and judgment, we have on Matthew, there's two passages there. One that says, "For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them," like these things that come from their mouth, from the mouth. "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander." Because they were having this discussion about the apostles not washing their hands or what they were eating and meaning like they were impure. And Jesus said, it's not what goes in that makes you impure. It's what comes out of it. What comes from your mouth. And on James we have, anyone who speaks ill of a brother speaks ill of the law and judges the law. And if you judge the law, you're no longer a follower of the law. And at some translations they say observer of the law, but you're the judge. So if you're criticizing, if you're judging other people, pointing the finger, you're not a follower or observer of the law. And we all are followers and observers of the law. There's only one judge necessarily, and we're not that judge. So if we're speaking ill of someone else, we're already judging them. And we often judge them with our own perceptions. And there is this story that I thought to bring here because it fits well with the lecture today. It's about this woman, it's fictional, but this woman was known for slander, for talking gossip and talking about people and all of that. So she went and she sought the help of an ancient wise sage, a woman that was like much older, much wiser, and she searched for this woman and she's like, I want to stop gossiping, I want to like have a better control of my tongue, and I want to understand like the consequence. People say about the consequences of my gossip and my speaking ill of others, but I don't get it. What do you recommend? And the sage said, there's something you can do. We can talk about that, but first I want you to do something for me. I want you to grab a bunch of feathers from birds, grab a bunch of feathers, put them in a sack, okay? And then I want you to go to a top of a hill. And when you're at the top of the hill, I want you to throw those feathers, throw them at the wind, okay? At the top of the mountain, throw them at the wind. All those feathers you collected. And then the woman was like, okay, I can do that. That's the exercise, I'll do it. So she went, she threw all the feathers in the air, and then she went down, talked to the sage again. It's like, okay, I did it. What next? But I didn't get much out of it, but like, what next? She's like, okay, now I want you to go there and collect all the feathers you threw in the wind. And the woman looked at her, it's like, I can't, what are you talking about? I can't do that. It's like, I can maybe get one or two, but all of them went farther from what I can see, and I don't have control over them anymore. So like, that's exactly what your words do. So now you're learning, you said you wanted to learn about the consequences of your words. That's the same thing with the feathers in the wind from the top of a mountain. They spread far beyond view. They can spread to places we don't know and cause things we don't even have control over and we don't even understand. And suffice to say that the story ends with the woman actually becoming more disciplined with her own tongue. Mute. So on the topic of slander, right? We have The Living Spring, an amazing book, obviously, by Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico. And this message number 151 says, kindness is not always appropriate in the circle of loyal conversations. Sometimes a clarifying discussion requires serene yet decided forcefulness. Nevertheless, great care in regard to comments made afterwards is indispensable. So he's talking about, loyal conversations. Sometimes we need to have harsher conversations or more serious conversations. Or sometimes we disagree with somebody and we want to tell them that, or we want to come to a solution of a disagreement. Those will occur. And Emmanuel is saying here that clarifying discussion requires serene yet decided forcefulness. So he's saying again, not to overuse. Always remember the surgeon with the scalpel. Be like a surgeon with the scalpel in those difficult conversations where you're only addressing what needs to be addressed and in a very, very efficient way, not necessarily going and blowing things out of proportion. Slander lies in wait for sincerity in order to muddy its waters and neutralize its efforts. Malice does not deserve the crown of serious discussion. Giving it too much importance in conversations actually enlarges its sphere of action. So by talking, in malicious ways, slandering, we're actually enlarging the sphere of action of those words. And as we saw before from the law of action and reaction, we are attracted, those around us are attracted to what we do. So if we're doing that, we're actually enlarging the sphere of action of those spirits that are also still tempted to slander, to gossip, to have this malicious conversation and just want to see, everything burn. So Emmanuel is like bringing us to our attention. And he even says that slander is a subtle poison. Something that, degrades something else. So that's what slander is, the misguided words. The words spoken out of hate, out of, retaliation, just to hurt the other person or just to talk bad about someone else without any purpose whatsoever of that conversation. So then somebody may say, okay, then this is nice to know, but how can I improve that? How can I improve my words or how I use my words? And then I'm going to show you what actually inspired me to do this lecture. And I created this lecture a while back. A concept from Socrates inspired me to do this lecture. And it's called the triple filter. So Socrates said that before we say anything, we have to make sure our words will pass a triple filter test, which is goodness, truthfulness, and usefulness. Is what we're about to say true? Is what we're about to say good? And is what we're about to say useful? And this is so interesting because, and I've used this with patients as well before to teach them. This is so good because oftentimes we may find that what we have to say is useful. Perhaps it is true. Let's say we're criticizing someone and I want that person to get better. And I come to them and I smash them and all of that. It is useful because they will get better. And it is true. I'm criticizing them on something they need to get better, but is it good? And by the way, the goodness here is not only the content, but the way we speak. Is it good what I'm about to say? Or I may say, okay, I want to say something that's good and something that's true, but in the end has no utility. Then Socrates says, don't say it. So if what we're about to say passes the triple filter test, we can say it. And honestly, by doing this exercise, myself and observing these things around when we're talking, it is incredible the amount of things we say that would not pass the triple filter test. So that's something I wanted to bring to you guys. So the idea of having this filter for what we say, how we say as well, And if we want to go even further then, because we know the importance of words and everything, Chico Xavier had this thing that he calls the water of peace, where he says, somebody asked him about, okay, what do I do when somebody's getting on my nerves and I want to say something back to them? What can I do? And he said, oh, you go and you grab a vase of water, pour some water in a cup, and as soon as that person says something and you're feeling irritated, put that water in your mouth, but don't swallow it. Hold that water in your mouth. And think, and think, and think. And he says until the irritation goes away, basically. Which may never come. But the point is, just by doing that and putting the water in our mouth and holding it there, we prevent ourselves from doing what we saw in the second slide of the presentation, which is our thoughts are very quick and our tongues are very loose and very quick as well. So we prevent that, and we prevent a lot of words that would not pass the triple filter test, and a lot of words that would probably cause destruction. So we put that water in our mouth and we hold it there. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Don't swallow, because if you have water in your mouth, you can speak. And he calls that the water of peace, because imagine how many arguments and fights would have been avoided if everybody was doing the water of peace method, let's call it that way. So then somebody may say, okay, I'm going to be a mute. I'm going to do vow of silence, not talk ever. If my words have all of that and I don't have full control of my words, I'm going to do a vow of silence and just don't talk ever again. How would that work? Let's see what the Spirit says. They say. Question 772. What is to be thought of the vow of silence prescribed by certain sects from the very earliest times? You should read, and the Spirit says, so it's great. They say, you should rather ask yourselves whether speech is in nature and why God has given it. Of course, we can't understand why God does things, but God has given us speech. We have that ability. We have that capacity. Why? To use it. God condemns the abuse, they go on to say, not the use of the faculties he has given. Silence, however, is useful, for in silence you have fuller possession of yourself. Your spirit is freer, and you can then enter into more intimate communication with us, the discarnate spirits. But a vow of silence is an absurdity. If we think about overuse of speech, that's like an exaggeration. A vow of silence is using the tool of silence in an exaggerated way as well. And it defeats the purpose of the law of society. If we're all meant to be quiet, we would we have a mountain of our own, a beach of our own, live by ourselves and never speak again. That doesn't exist. We are in a society. We are born in a family. We are born with others around us. So we need to use our words. And it's natural for us to use our words. But the misuse or the overuse is the problem. It's not necessarily use. So the vow of silence is, if we imagine a pendulum where we talk too much, the vow of silence is in the other side of that spectrum, that pendulum swinging all the way to the other side. So that's not what we're supposed to be doing as well, and that's not necessarily it's going to bring us to our own the taming of our own instincts and our own lesser emotions. Joanna, in the book Happy Life, psychographed by Divaldo, there's a couple of messages on silence, because remember, the lecture to the presentation today is about words and silence. Silence, then, is the alternative, a very good alternative for a lot of the times that we want to speak. So in her book, Happy Life, she says that, and they brought two messages here. She says, express your ideas calmly. If the other person disagrees, remain silent and give him or her over to time, which teaches us all unhurriedly. Meaning without hurry, without, it just teaches us. It's going to come. And she's saying the time will teach that. Message number 25. She says, when asked about another person, always give positive feedback. If this is not possible because the person acts reprehensibly, keep silent or speak benevolently. Remember the triple filter? Exactly. Goodness, usefulness, and truthfulness. Avoid aggravating his or her situation about this person that speaks, that acts reprehensively. or making it more well known. You are not an overseer of other people's behaviors. You cannot know if yesterday's offender might now be in recovery. Let your opinions always be uplifting and your words helpful. So she's basically saying we're not the overseer of other people's behaviors. As we saw in the Bible back then, we cannot judge. Otherwise, we're judges and not followers of the law. We're judges of the law. And who are we to judge someone else? Who are we to know if that moment in their life, in those actions, that person is actually at their highest peak of his or her own evolutionary stage? Maybe that's the best they can do right now. And maybe they've already overcome so much, and we're there judging them because they don't act like us or what we think they should act. And Joanna even says that words expressed in anger rarely convey what a person is thinking or what they're probably trying to achieve. So when we speak in anger, it's rarely what we really want to express, and it's rarely how we really want to express. So she's saying, use the tool of silence wisely. Use silence. In the book Harvest of Light, also we don't have this book just yet, by Emmanuel from the Living Spring collection. Message number 6, called In Yourself, says this: whatever difficulty you find yourself in, refrain from carrying the burden of afflictions and unresolved questions. Penetrate the silence of your own soul. Listen to the thoughts that come from your own being, and you will recognize that the fundamental solution to all life's problems will come from yourself. That is super powerful, what Emmanuel is saying here. The solution will come from ourselves. But we get so in the weeds, we get so lost in the weeds of daily life, of daily routine, of the hurries and everything and the stresses. We don't actually have time, or we do have time, but we actually don't take time away, or apart, to look inward, to silence ourselves. And he's saying here that oftentimes the solution to life's problems is within us. And we know that, but we got to listen to ourselves. And there's another added benefit of silence as well. When we're silent and we're really, really thinking and being quiet to ourselves, we can better attune to the spirits that want to help us as well. We can better listen to those spiritual benefactors. In the book Intervals by Chico, there's this message as well, by Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico. There's this message about silence. It says, in the silence of the spirit, the thoughts of heaven illuminate the thoughts of earth, and benevolent and wise voices speak to our ears through the inarticulate verb of inspiration, which was what I was just saying. We get these inspirations where we're able to collect ourselves in silence, meditation perhaps, or just in silence, just trying to connect with God, connect with those around us through our own silence. It is a tool that we don't use very often. And it's a tool not only for when somebody says something, and Chico was saying, put the water in your mouth. That's basically being silent and refraining from saying something back in anger. But also when we dedicate ourselves, and sometimes ourselves, to become silent and trying to really, really connect. Jesus also highlighted the prudence and consideration, pointing out the richness of silence, which is up to us to use in the struggles of life in favor of the success of our own tasks. So it is up for us to use. It's also a tool that we can use, silence, to help us, and to help us connect not only with ourselves, with God, and with the spirits, the good spirits around us, when we're trying really, really hard to contain all those, and like I said, to tame those instincts and become more disciplined ourselves. But if we know that silence is good and all of that, why is it so hard to be silent? Because we're still evolving. That's the basic answer. We're still getting to a point in our evolution, in our spiritual depuration, our spiritual evolution, where we are learning a lot, we are improving a lot. We're way better than we were back then. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this planet. We would be in a primitive planet. We're already achieved so much, but there's still so much else to achieve. There's still so much. And the idea of silence is very hard for us because, one, it's not often used when it's supposed to be used. So people around us don't often use that. In an argument, in a discussion, it's very hard to use silence because the other person may interpret that as disrespectful as well. There are so many variants here and things that make using silence so difficult, but it is, like we're seeing here, a necessary tool that we must learn, and we must, as a tool, we must use and must sharpen it, and so it doesn't get rusty as well. But we will achieve moments in which we are more silent in the face of adversity as well, and we need to exercise patience for that, resilience for that. In the book Happy Life, message number 49, Joanna says, many people relish in spreading bad news. Be very discreet with them. They will test your resolve with gossip. In such circumstances, silence is the cotton that dampens the noise of the spread of growing evil. I love the fact that Joanna said that silence is like cotton that dampens. How great is that? If you think of cotton, we think of something that's like soft, malleable, right? We think of something that's, I don't know, we think of like cotton being like white and like pure and all of that. It's great that cotton has that use as well to dampen those things. And she's saying, obviously, she's making like an analogy here with cotton, but it's so interesting to think of silence as this almost elevated tool that we must use, we must learn to use through practice, so we can stay away from gossip and gossiping ourselves as well, participating in gossip or hearing that. Because, like I said, the triple filter, even if we're just commenting, hey, did you see what happened to that person? You know, oh, he got fired. Oh, that person cheated. Oh, that person, or reality TV, like, oh, look what they're doing. This, all those things that we do because it's so much like on impulse. If we just kept quiet and just silence ourselves, silence our minds, and hold our tongues, much more benefits will come than to just be unruly with the verb, as we saw from before. But we need to practice that, and we need to exercise. So, to end today's lecture, I wanted to bring this poetry that is the second thing that inspired me to do this lecture today. The first was Socrates' triple filter. So, how can we speak? When can we speak? And the second, about the silence piece. What inspired me to talk about silence was this poetry, psychographed by Chico Xavier by Mei Mei. And I brought it here not in its entirety, but the parts that fit very well with our conversation today. So I'm going to read that because I don't want to paraphrase such a beautiful poetry. She said, notice the melody of silence in the divine creations. In heaven, everything is harmony without ostentation of strength. The sun shining without noise, the worlds in movement without disorder, the constellations shining without dazzling us. And on earth, everything signals the music of silence, exalting God's infinite love. The seed germinating without fuss, the wounded tree preparing the fruit that feeds you without revolt, the water that hides in the hearts of the fountain today to quench your thirst tomorrow. What articulated words would define their greatness? That is why the Lord also helps us through circumstances that do not speak, through time, the mute sage. Do not break the melody of silence where your phrase would sound at odds with the law of love that governs our path. Help without noise wherever you go. Remember the Celestial Father's unlimited patience with our faults, and let us help without fuss our companions on his earthly pilgrimage, which many times only awaits the help of our silence in order to rise to communion with the Heavenly Father. The melody of silence. And that leads us to ponder how much are we talking and how much are we using silence. So I hope that is going to inspire and instruct us to be more careful with what we're saying and when we're saying it as well. Wish everybody a blessed week.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Yuri. I don't know for you, but for me it came at the right time. I actually feel like being silent and just processing it and, you know, going through all the meanings. All right, so again, thank you so much. Let me see if I can get back to this. I think everything got closed. Okay. Let me see if I can get this back on. So for you who are watching, we are going now to the second part of our meeting. So this is a time where you can have your water next to you. You can, it's not projecting. Have your water next to you. Do your own prayers. We're going to do this here at the center. So I will just ask the past givers right now to please take your place. You can leave that on. You can leave that on for sure. Yep. Is there anybody else in that room? No. There are more kids in there?
3 adults.
3 adults? Okay. All right. Maybe we can bring everybody in. Yeah, that would be easier. Let's just do that. Have all the kids joining us this morning. Hello everybody, welcome to the Big Adults classroom. So now we are going to sit down and we're going to play the silence game. Let's see who can stay quiet for the longest time. Will win a prize, huh? Yep. And we'll ask the good spirits, our guardian angel, and our dear Lord to bless us all. At this time, we are going to receive the invisible gifts from the sky that will come to all of us. And so be it. Dear Father, thank you so much for the blessings of today. We thank you for the presence of our benefactors, all the blessings, the intuition, the inspiration, the loving presence is next to us. Bless us all in both realms of life. Help each one of us to live here today taking these gifts, the gifts of the truth, the gifts of your gospel, the gifts of the good energy shared. Bless our homes, our families, the little ones in particular who are here with us. May they be blessed as they represent our best hopes in the future of our planet. We thank you again for all the blessings of today. May all of us live in peace and return in peace next week. Thank you so much, and so be it.
Can I speak to everyone a little